Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice. I said it 6 times, so that canceled out the first 3 times. I mean, I just saw it, you just saw it, and it was good. And I enjoyed it, sure. I liked the musical adaptation better than any of the movies, but the movies are still good, this one included. And this was good for the most part. It was just one element I didn't really jive with for the entire movie. I don't think there would have been a way for me to like it as is. I just didn't like it, so I have one major critique for this movie. Forgive my ramblings, let's just get into it, folks. Yes, I just said that. Astrid was a character with largely no use, and while she was used to push the plot in the direction it needed to go, there was nothing that made it so that she could have been the only one to do it. Delia could have done a decent amount of the basics of what she did, I feel. Even more so, I think the scenes she's in could have been removed to make more room for our main antagonist, Dolores. And honestly, that would have been more compelling, or at least that's the way I see it. And I feel like Astrid was only there at all for 2 reasons, and neither of them were needed, and one of them could have been expanded on to be good, and just wasn't. 1, in order to capitalize off of Hollywood's current gothy teen actress as much as possible, and 2, to utilize everyone's love for Beetlejuice the Musical's Lydia. We'll start with the first one. Astrid was a character I felt was tailor-made for Ortega to play. I wouldn't have been surprised to hear that this movie was only made to capitalize off of her and they couldn't figure out what else to do with her. And while, if that's true, I'm glad that we have this movie because of her, but I still wish that it had been done better or just not included Ortega at all. She's in Wednesday, she's in Scream, she's in X, The Fallout, Studio 666, American Carnage, Finest Kind, she's in Sabrina Carpenter's music video for Taste, and now she's in Beetlejuice too. She is now the horror actress, she's the scream queen of our era. It's pretty safe to say that Ortega is solidly everywhere, but to me it felt like she was reprising an old role with a twist to it in this movie. I honest to God felt like I was watching an episode of Wednesday spliced into the Beetlejuice movie. I was pretty much taken out of it every time that Astrid was on screen. And, quick note, this is not me complaining about a Latina actress taking over the mainstream. I am totally on board with that, and I'm very happy that young Latina girls, like me, are getting a chance to see themselves in the mainstream. I love representation, and Ortega is a great part of this. Side note over. This isn't about her race or gender or anything, this is about the movie, Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. Yeah, I felt like this was the weakest part of the whole movie. Her humor style, her expressions, the whole boarding school scenes, her whole demeanor, that was just Wednesday. And I'm sure that Ortega is a fine actor. I haven't seen too much of her work. I saw Wednesday, and I would have seen her appearances in Scream, if not for my friend who loves the movies, telling me that they were the worst ones. And again, probably not her fault, just that the original director was not involved because he was dead. But from what I've seen, I felt that she had gotten typecast into the exact same role that she played in one of her most famous roles. The same damn character, please. I would appreciate some variety here, but I doubt we'll get any. And Astrid is just another perfect example of this. But of course, they couldn't just throw Wednesday into Beetlejuice. So they gave her a vague activist background that is hardly mentioned after the exposition and doesn't add much to her character. It was hardly any motivation, and the motivation she is given isn't much better. Let me just do some listing of some things that are relevant to Astrid throughout this movie. Dead parent she's still mourning, living parent who she barely talks to and consistently fails to understand her and doesn't try to. That same living parent never talks about the dead parent even though they know that the death is still heavily affecting her. Going to the netherworld because she thinks that she can see her dead parent there one final time or maybe even bring them back. The dead parent being the one who always loved to go all out on Halloween even if it was in an untraditional way. Am I still talking about Astrid? Or did I just start talking about the adaptation of Lydia Dietz from Beetlejuice the musical? Technically, I'm talking about both of them. One's just got a dead dad, and the other has... Dead mom! Watching the movie, it was pretty easy to see that Astrid was meant to fill the Lydia role in the movie, despite Lydia being there. Lydia couldn't be what she was in the 80s or in the musical anymore. She needed to be the adult, and they needed to have this teenage girl to appeal to that audience who wanted to see themselves in her. So, they took a lot of what made Lydia in her very popular musical adaptation and slapped it onto Astrid, and sadly, she didn't do it nearly as well as intended. I don't think I would have had as much of a problem with this if it worked as intended, but it wasn't done as well as they clearly wanted it to be done. Astrid hardly has a dead mom moment of her own. When Lydia and her dad reconcile at the end of the musical, it's because Charles makes an effort to understand his daughter, and they have a real moment when he finally tells her how much losing dead mom meant to him. They agree to talk about her, just like she wants to, and it lets them both heal together. It doesn't outright fix anything, but but it's clear that this is the start. And they're both terrified at that moment, and Charles still makes the effort for his daughter to make things better because he cares about her. Meanwhile, Astrid and Lydia never get to have this conversation. They get close, they talk briefly about a few old memories in the attic over the photo album, and Lydia agrees to let Astrid keep it. They never get the time to stop and talk like they need to. Instead, in the time that could have been a pause to talk, they instead see dead Dad. They talk to him. He tells them to stick together and look out for each other, and that's that. They don't have that talk with each other. Instead, he tells them what they need to find out for themselves. It undercuts the moment we could have had so much. During the musical's production, they discussed having Lydia get to have a moment like that, where she sees dead Mom again. But she doesn't get that. Instead, she gets this incredibly visceral moment in Home. She is so lost at that moment. She's terrified. She yells out her grief and how desperate she is for her mom to guide her home. But she doesn't just mean out of the netherworld. She means she wants her mom to guide her back to a way to be normal again and to feel the way she used to. This is the turning point in her character. She comes to all the conclusions she needs to come to about her feelings about losing her mother herself. And even through all of her screaming and crying and begging for her mother is not the one who shows up to her rescue. It is her father, the one who she really needs at that moment. And she makes sure that he hears her. For the first time, he hears how she's feeling. He hears what he needs to hear in order to understand. They agree to find a way to the home Lydia sings about together, and then Lydia goes home. She searched tirelessly for her mom, and she found what had been right in front of her the whole time. Astrid is never given the solo screen time to properly process her grief and come to a conclusion like this. She never really gets to move on. She gets a band-aid slapped over her grief, and then she has to move on to the next thing that's happening so quickly that she never gets the chance to deal with it. She isn't the focus for the rest of the movie. Astrid could have been done so right, and they wasted the potential to do what they really could have. They could have utilized the Scream Queen of the era and the modern Lydia Deetz and turned it into one character that leaves an impact on the audience. But they never allowed her to. Even though I had all this to say about the movie, I did still enjoy it. Using stop motion again in places was great. Danny Elfman pulled through on the soundtrack. They just underutilized what could have been a really great character. Subscribe, like the video, and comment down below. Until next time, listeners. But, quick side note to any of my subscribers, I will be returning to my comics content next month. I just really needed to say this. I watched the movie and I had opinions, so this is what happens when I have opinions. But we'll be back to the regularly scheduled program in like a week, because I have a short compilation coming out then. And then November, it's gonna be an essay. Same with December and January, etc. Until next time, listeners.